Thank you so much, and thank you everybody for being here this afternoon. I have to say, I've been coming to GM Vietnam for 3 years, and every year it's better and better, and this year is no exception. You know, previous year we were all crowded in a tiny little space, no elbow room, and this year there's so many more people, but you can actually breathe, you can enjoy the environment, and it's just wonderful being back in Vietnam, being in Hanoi for the first time. And so I just want to say thank you to the organizers for putting on a great event and giving me an opportunity to share with you the really amazing things that we're doing over at Aptos. And so they introduced me briefly. I'm David Wolinsky, head of engineering at Aptos. I've been part of this organization predating Aptos when we were back at Facebook, when we were trying to explore how to have global inclusivity in payments using blockchains, when we built out Libra, and then when we left Facebook to go create Aptos. And it's been an exciting journey. And the cornerstone of what we're doing at Aptos is trying to identify how to make crypto and Web3 available in the real world for real world purposes. We are transforming from these smallish efforts that you can see where you have hundreds of or thousands of users, and we want to see everybody engaging in Web3 in meaningful ways. And a big component of that is our efforts towards building what we call the global trading engine. But before I go into what Aptos is and all that great stuff, I just want to share some of my sentiments and experiences in what my Web3 journey has been and what I've seen along the path. And so to kick that off, I just want to emphasize, everything in Web3 is really hard. Let me share a few stories. The first story I want to share is about Trump and his recent election. Early in this year, in January, there was a token that was launched, and you could buy it through Solana. And in doing so, you could at least attempt to buy it. But the reality is, in order to go through that process, let's assume you're a new user in Web3, you have to go through a very complex process of understanding what in exchanges, where do you buy Solana? What is Solana? How do I even get access to that? You have to have KYC, you have to have banking information. A lot of processes that actually eliminate a lot of people from being able to access crypto. Then once you actually have the ability to do so, you buy the asset, you get a wallet, and you finally make your way to a DEX where you can try to swap or trade into the Trump token. But the reality is, the blockchain was unavailable. Solana was so overwhelmed with just one token being launched that a majority of users can't even use Solana for other purposes. It's really disappointing and shows that Solana and Web3 still aren't necessarily ready for real-world access. And so let's continue the stories of challenges that impact real-world usage of Web3. Another example is opportunities. Let's say that you're interested in investing on blockchains. You bring in some stables into one blockchain, and you wait, there's a better opportunity on another one. So you explore bridging, you move the assets around, but it's confusing, and bad things can happen. This actually happened to me. I was moving some stables from Avalanche into Aptos, and I went to Wormhole, and what ended up happening is I ended up with USDC AV in my wallet. And that's useless. That's a non-liquid asset. I can't do anything with that except send it back through the bridge back to where it came from. But if you read this whole message, I waited 24 hours with my asset in limbo, not knowing what was going on. I was scared. I was worried I lost a lot of money. I was worried my spouse was going to beat me because I was doing crazy things with DeFi. And then there's other stories. We've got examples of how clever traders were using Hyperliquid. They found interesting positions on this asset called Jelly Jelly. And they made some interesting positions. They were up over $1 million, even more. And Hyperliquid said, wait, we don't want to eat that loss. So being as centralized as Hyperliquid is, they decided to close the positions, backdate the data, and say, actually, this is a bad position, and we're going to be able to eliminate it, and you're out, and we're up. And so effectively, what should have been a game-winning position for somebody outside of Hyperliquid ended up in a $1 million loss. And this is because of the centralization that we're seeing in the space. We've seen stories about crypto maintenance, crypto ownership, or even in the case of Web2, where you put your assets into an entity like PayPal, and then PayPal says, wait, we don't know who you are, we don't trust you, we're going to freeze your assets. This happens all the time to nonprofit organizations. And their goal is just to help people around the world, but once their assets get frozen, employees don't get paid, and good is not done for the community. And we've seen this even for consumers, where in the case of FTX, they were doing weird stuff with assets, and they got into substantial debt and ended up closing, and users were out in billions of dollars. And still, we're seeing that people haven't even necessarily been repaid. And you can go back to other cases like Mt. Gox, where it took years upon years for customers to eventually get paid back. And this is all because of trust put into other entities. And then another example that I think is really important is payments, or just stablecoin movements. And you can see over here that blockchains have varying different costs. We're seeing, fortunately, that blockchains like Avalanche and Polygon are finally bringing down costs. And, the delays are still there. 2 seconds to 5 seconds, that still is a long time for payment processing, especially when you're comparing to credit cards that are near instant. But the fees have dropped, so instead of paying 2 to 4% or 30 cents to $3, you're finally paying pennies. But the problem is, in terms of real-world possibilities, there's no way that you can actually use these for real payment surfaces, especially when you're comparing to credit cards that are doing tens of thousands of transactions per second in high throughput situations. And so what we're learning from this, what I've learned from this, is that there's a lot of complexities in Web3. Whether it be the bridging scenario where long development times complex, or taking shortcuts can lead to bad experiences where you get nervous and you have to go and start interacting directly with smart contracts rather than dApps. And most importantly, the technology is very impressive, but it simply doesn't match what we're seeing in the Web 2 context. And so that's where I'd love to introduce you, if you're not familiar, Aptos, because Aptos is built for real-world applications. And it's the first blockchain of its kind that really scales against these efforts. And I'd love to give you some more details of exactly what that means. And what began with Aptos was 2 core layers. We have this high-performance layer, which is our blockchain, it's our core consensus layer, it's our transaction dissemination. Effectively, we can do well over tens of thousands of transactions per second while maintaining sub-second latency. You saw in the case of Solana, it hit a few hundred transactions in the Trump scenario case and fell over. Other applications weren't working. We've battle-tested Aptos in the real world and demonstrated that we can have hundreds of millions of transactions per day. Meanwhile, users have no idea what's going on. They're having fun in their DeFi, in their payments, in whatever application they're experimenting with. Built on top of that, we have a secure move language. This is revolutionary. It's brand new to the scene. Well, I guess it was 3 years ago, but now it's still really revolutionary in the way in which it tackles the challenges for developers in Web3. It moves away from just treating everything as numbers, where you're just moving, one unit to another person, and you can end up with double payments or other type of very nefarious attacks or development challenges, and moves to a native Web3 mentality towards development. It makes it much more secure. And we've also brought along formal verification to make sure that you're working with mathematically sound concepts as you're developing. That means as you're building out financial instruments in Web3, you can be just as confident as you are in Web 2. But we didn't stop there, because just this alone still leads a lot for developers to figure out. What we want on Aptos is for developers in the space to focus on business, on product, not on understanding the nuances of Web3 and how they take advantage of it. So we're working on a handful of different technologies to really meet the developers at that very high layer, much like you can experience in Web 2. The first of which is Build. Build is basically your go-to to understanding blockchain data, interacting with the blockchain for rapid application development at the API layer. We've recently announced our new initiative called Shelby. Shelby brings hot storage to the main world in a decentralized, scalable fashion. You're probably familiar with decentralized storage, but what you might not be aware of is it's not really ready for the types of things that you're seeing on traditional cloud storage. For example, Netflix. Netflix is built on top of AWS. AWS goes offline, say goodbye to your Netflix. It's going to be a very boring weekend. It's happened in the past. It can happen again in the future. We believe that through Web3 by Aptos, Shelby and Aptos, we can bring together a decentralized Netflix that would ensure availability and accessibility around the world with no concern about potential hardware failures. In addition, we're working on this concept of a global trading engine. You see a lot of challenges within the space of centralized exchanges in terms of accessibility, availability, and what assets can be listed there, and a lot of regulation that goes into building out centralized exchanges. You can look at decentralized exchanges, and they're great. They have all these amazing things available to them, but they're really hard to use, unintuitive, hard to access. For instance, Hyperliquid requires that you go through multiple steps to actually get access to it. We, on Aptos, can build all this technology directly for you, so as a consumer that's building, or sorry, a builder that's directing towards consumers, you don't have to understand the nuances. We've taken care of the hard work for you. And what does this actually mean in terms of practicality? I've been ranting numbers at you, but I want to put these concretely in front of you so you can take it away with you. We've demonstrated applications that have scaled to over 100,000 concurrent users. This means all these users are sending transactions all at the same time, and the network's just humming along. We're maintaining our sub-second latency that you can see right here. Literally, you can go to a POS system, you can go to another user, you can move assets from a centralized exchange in less than a second. You cannot find that anywhere else. You can see these really great graphics where you show that Aptos is moving USDT in 500 milliseconds or 400 milliseconds. Super incredible. Everybody's always wow when they see that the first time. But the real icing on the cake is over here when you're looking at this throughput and you're seeing, wait, we did 326 million transactions in a single day on Aptos. You go and you look at the other numbers for other blockchains, the second closest is Solana at 30 million. That means we're an entire order of magnitude more robust than what we're seeing on Solana. And the really interesting thing here is we didn't stop at 326 million because of the blockchain's limitations. What ends up happening is the rest of the world, the rest of Web3, is still catching up to the performance opportunity that exists inside of Aptos. Centralized exchanges, indexers, other service providers aren't used to what Aptos can throw at it, and so they all have to be made even more incredible, more robust in order to handle the scale that Aptos is planning to bring to Web3. And of course, the other thing I really like here is that we have two other great things. One is the cost. Super cheap to do transactions, super cheap to create data. If you're doing assets on Aptos, it's negligible. You're going to be simply just focused on the asset and not about the cost. And it effectively allows for application developers to subsidize the cost without having any impact on their budget and allowing users to focus on engagement rather than worrying about fees, times, all that kind of good stuff. And that's complemented by our seamless onboarding experiences where you don't have to download any wallet in order to immediately experience the blockchain through our seamless social login and web wallet experiences. And so I want to go into a few examples of how we actually leverage this. The first of which you can see over here, my cute son playing this game called Tapos. Tapos was this play-to-click game that was just intended to be a demo, fun application. It was actually built here in Vietnam by a really great team. And the idea here was that we wanted to test out how many real-world transactions we can put on Aptos all at once while still evaluating whether or not the blockchain would be accessible and available. And you can look at all the data over here. It's really impressive. We ran over 12,000 transactions at peak for a sustained period of time. I think this was for several minutes. But we also ran 5,000 transactions per second for hours. Again, these are data points that you will see on no other blockchain. And the other really critical things here is other applications were running, no impact. No users said anything at all throughout the entire experience, which implies that it was a very successful experience. And the other aspect, as I've been hammering away, is the cost per transaction, marginal, negligible. No other blockchain can be this fast and this affordable and this accessible. We are really bringing world access into Web3 for everybody through these efforts. Another great example goes back a bit in time to really demonstrate the robustness of the Aptos build tech stack. And so I mentioned a little bit about there, but here, the idea in this application is that we had a collaborative drawing application. Every single pixel here is represented by on-chain data. And that means as a user submits a transaction, they're effectively modifying the data stored on-chain, and it gets re-rendered into this graphic. So you can see hundreds of thousands of users all at the same time building this image. And you can see all the data over here, the critical information. 330,000 users in a matter of a single day interacted with this application. We can see millions of transactions intersecting with it and millions of pixels. And this was really incredible. The other thing that's really fascinating here, mind you, so the data here, we're using Aptos build, the indexing power, to effectively pull the data off the blockchain and present it in a convenient fashion. But we're also covering the costs for every transaction here through the Aptos build sponsored transaction mechanism. So your users, they don't even have to have a wallet. They don't have to have any of the gas token, they can simply start interacting with the blockchain by logging in with their Google, a key feature of our keyless or Aptos Connect technology. And the last demo I want to talk about is Supervillains. It's a very addictive game. I play too much of it on Aptos. And the key things I like about Supervillains is they demonstrate a lot of the really core technology that Aptos brings. We have an amazing NFT standard that allows you to generate NFTs from on-chain randomness in a sub-second. So effectively, you can take this little pill over here, and it will generate an NFT of various different properties for you just like that. And these assets then can be imported into the game, so that you can have special features in the game, but you can also take them back to the blockchain itself and transfer and trade with other users and have other just value of having them. And they also have this amazing payments product so that you can actually go in and make purchases in various different crypto. And this is all powered by the Aptos blockchain. The really cool thing about payments in this case is this organization isn't necessarily available to take payments everywhere in the world through various different entities like PayPal or Stripe, but through the power of crypto, they can literally take payments from everybody in the world. And so that leads me to the effort that we're really focused moving forward is the notion of this global trading engine. And I want to tie this back to the stories that I started off with. And I know I don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to go a little bit more quickly through these slides. But the key emphasis of the global trading engine is that for builders, we want to create immersive experiences. We want to make sure everybody's able to just, again, focus on their product, focus on your business. Don't worry about Web3. What that means for consumers is you didn't even realize it was Web3. You just think you're thinking of Robinhood and other types of great experiences like that. So let's talk about the Trump token. Remember, a few hundred transactions. All of a sudden, people can't access the blockchain. Not great. But you think about Aptos, we've got all this amazing technology, and I could go into each one of these bullets for hours and tell you about why it's revolutionary and why it's the first of its kind. But suffice to say, I showed you what Aptos did to the blockchain. It handled orders of magnitude more than what they saw during Trump token and didn't even flinch. And we have more technology coming out on a regular basis that further enhances this. We're already shooting for tens, hundreds of thousands of transactions per second so that we can really be a centralized exchange killer. Again, I mentioned like sub-second latency, 10,000K TPS load. It's incredible technology. We talked about costs. And I mentioned it quite a few times, but what I want to really emphasize is when you look at how Aptos fits into this, we're competing with credit cards. We have almost near instant transfer time for assets. You're doing payments on chain, Aptos is the way to do it. You do it in split second. Cost, cheaper than any other blockchain out there. But the most important thing here is you can actually scale. That means you don't have to worry about other entities doing payments at the same time, risking that your payments aren't going to go through. Aptos is ready for your payment traffic. Worried about centralized services taking advantage of you? Not on Aptos. We focused on decentralization as one of our core efforts. And so what you can see is that we have over 520 nodes distributed across globally. Over 151 of those are validators, and they're in 22 different countries, 47 cities. It's very, very, very diverse, very, very well distributed, and that's emphasized by this 18 Nakamoto coefficient, which means we're heavily decentralized, which means that your assets are securely and safely distributed, and therefore you don't have to worry about compromises or entities taking advantage of centralization. We talked about not maintaining your crypto or the motivation for downloading wallets to manage your crypto, hardware wallets, things that are not intuitive for users. And at Aptos, we're like, we can't support that. We need to make sure we enable users that are Web 2 natives that don't understand what it means to have your assets in some sort of Chrome extension. And so we built Keyless, a seamless onboarding technology, no wallet necessary, uses social login to seamlessly allow for you to own your crypto directly on the chain. The high-level concept is that effectively, your social login is given as a zero-knowledge proof to the blockchain to manage your account. And this technology is available both as a web wallet concept, but you can also bring it directly into your dApp, so you can have seamless trading experiences or whatever you want, all within the house of your application. And we're expanding upon that because we realize that every entity, every individual building in Web3 may have different requirements for how your users access the blockchain. So we built in a native account abstraction directly on chain. The beautiful thing is you can take existing accounts, you can create new accounts, you don't require any middleware. It's all built directly on the blockchain. You will not find another blockchain that offers a level of flexibility in defining how your users authenticate to their accounts. And this further enables for really advanced types of recovery and other frameworks so that entities can properly help users manage their accounts, especially as we entertain new regulation coming in for stable coins and other assets on chain. This offers a really unique and exciting way to see the future of Web3 manifest. The other aspect that we're really focused on is bringing in other assets from other chains. And that means we want to make sure that if you have a MetaMask account, a Phantom account on other chains, you can seamlessly bring in your assets and start interacting on Aptos through CCTP. And I don't have a lot of time here, so I'm going to quickly kind of rush through the rest of my slides. I want to emphasize that Aptos has been coming to Vietnam for quite a while. We started back at GM Vietnam in 2023. We're here in 2024, and it's been a whirlwind trip. We've been working with great partners, starting first with Amnes, who built out the amazing liquid staking protocol, best in class on Aptos. We then brought in Solana, who built out amazing technology as a great DEX. We saw more products come, such as Meso Finance, Aragon demonstrating great gaming, and then that led into our first initiative in this Vietnamese super team called Alpha Team, who has done amazing things in just 4 months and coming online earlier this year, bringing in projects like Cactos and Ernium, as well as Hedos and Fantasy. So Vietnam is building on Aptos, and it's phenomenal and great. There's a lot more that you can get out of Aptos, but I think the most important link I want to share for builders is we have an ongoing global hackathon just started. Please build with us. We're excited to see your projects. We've got all the technology so you can focus on, again, your product and your business. And all I can say is thank you so much for your time. Let's hack together. Thank you.